Hello, folks. This is Samuel Huber from Samuel Huber on YouTube, Huber Family Adventures on Instagram, samuelhuber.net. That's my website, Samuel Huber on Facebook. I'm here today with Bridget, an old coworker of mine. We worked at Yale together for a few years, and now she's working at CHOP as an intern. Bridget, can you tell the folks a bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Sam. So I am currently in school to get my master's degree in clinical and counseling psychology with a concentration in autism spectrum disorder. And previously, I worked as a teaching assistant at Yale School for Children with Autism, as well as other developmental differences. And then I did a lot of like TSS like work in schools and in home with children with, again, autism and other developmental differences. And then I also worked for a short period of time at the Brandywine Center for Autism in Delaware. And other than that, I'm just being a mom right now.
Yeah, that's its own challenges, definitely, being a new mama. So how has your perspective of autism changed over the years since I guess before you started working with them till now?
So I guess my first real experience of working with individuals with autism, I interned at the Kinney Center for Autism at St. Joe's University. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I am.
But I interned there, and that was such a cool experience. And before I even started, I didn't necessarily understand what I was getting into. I thought, it would be like kind of like a teaching position, like teaching as in like you're teaching them. And through the years, I've really learned that I'm the one that learns more things, the more people I work with, the more individuals with other differences I work with.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been the biggest thing that has changed for me, is just realizing how much I've grown and learned from meeting all these different people. And that has really been the greatest experience, is gaining education through interacting with all these people.
Yeah, I think that's some really good insight, Bridget, because a lot of people go into our field with the idea that we're going to be teaching them, that this is like we're above our students or patients, but really it's actually about autism has really taught us it's more about the human experience and connect, like the power of simple to complex human connection.
Absolutely.
What are some of the most powerful ways you've learned to really connect with people on the spectrum?
I think just coming into these encounters working with clients with just a genuine curiosity and wanting to get to know them and how I can best help them if I can. And just genuinely having that interest and that empathy for whatever they may be going through, and offering as much support as possible to, whatever they need at that time. That's kind of how I've been working so far, and definitely being an intern in the field of psychology right now has also really reinforced that that's really, for me at least, the best way to approach that, with just that true curiosity of wanting to get to know people.
Yeah, that's great. And then now that you are in a hospital setting, that is often a very tricky situation for autistic children and their families. Also, a lot of medical professionals are not trained on how to deal with autistic patients. What are some of the challenges you see in the hospital setting, and what are some of the ways to solve those challenges?
Right. So my current situation, the Child Guidance Resource Center with CHOP, is actually outpatient, and it is attached to their pediatric care network. So it's technically not in the hospital. So we have that going for us. It's a much less, maybe intense is the word I'm looking for, intense environment. It's more similar to kind of a doctor's office, so it's a little bit quieter. It doesn't have that rush of the hospital. But the added bonus we have is it's kind of like secluded from the pediatric area. So we are able to bring clients in to kind of meet them more so where they're at, and kind of cater the environment to whatever it is that they need, and offering, that sense, like giving them the sensory input that they do need, and not making sure there's any unnecessary sensory input. and kind of getting to know the individual and whatever it is that they need, we can kind of alter the environment a little bit. So that is definitely a bonus of our location.
So what do you mean by not unnecessary sensory input for the people who are unaware of how that affects like an autistic patient?
Right. So it could mean if they're, upset by loud noises, we can bring them into the private office. If the lights are too bright, we can adjust the lights. Anything, again, we're in a separate area, temperature adjustment, all that kind of stuff, so that they're not getting overwhelmed by any unnecessary sensory input, because we know that that can really affect individuals on the spectrum, and can be really upsetting for them, especially in unfamiliar situations. So trying to make them as comfortable as possible.
That's awesome. But what happens when they come into a medical setting and the sensory input is too much and they get an overload? What can medical professionals do if they're working in the ER and this autistic child's rushed in with a flesh wound or some sort of disease and they're flipping out? What are some things that they can do to soothe the child and get them to cooperate in the healing process?
Right. So ideally, these medical professionals are getting trained, at least somewhat, about an autism spectrum disorder. I think that's happened more so in recent years. It still needs a lot of work, but I think that's definitely something that's being brought into conversations more. But I think the best way to do that is, hopefully that they have a parent, guardian, someone that can kind of advise the doctors on what's going to make them the most comfortable, and hopefully those doctors are being receptive to what that child's or adult's even needs are, so that they are not putting unnecessary stress or causing them meltdowns unnecessarily, and really just making it as painless as possible as far as the experience goes, because as we know, if there's the rush and chaos that can sometimes happen in hospitals and ERs that can very easily lead to tantrums, meltdowns, anything like that. So hopefully that they're getting trained in the best ways to prevent that as much as possible.
All right, that's an excellent answer. I think the other huge thing that I have run into as a public speaker is a lot of people like you have like the best intentions, like, oh, I'm going to help all these children, but they go in, they actually are faced with those huge meltdowns and challenges. And there's only so much like the books on autism can prepare you for. What are some things that you think aren't in the books that people that have a similar position to you or want to have that should know going into actually working with these individuals?
Sorry, can you clarify a little bit? Like what do they need the most?
What they need to know, like for example, one thing I always tell them is like be prepared to be covered with every bodily fluid that you can think of. It's unavoidable working with these kids.
Yeah,
Some of the textbooks don't teach us.
I think one of the biggest things I've learned that I often repeat to myself is the saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and just remembering that no instance of autism is going to look the same, and understanding that and accepting that. So you're going to, again, bodily fluids, it's really going to depend on that individual's level of functioning, and meeting them where they're at and working on, whether they're high functioning, low functioning, whatever it may be, they still have strengths, and you need to play on those strengths and really just embracing, supporting, encouraging those strengths and working on them. It might be, for people who are just starting the field, it might be difficult to find those strengths at first, at first glance, but really just learning that that's what's going to be the most successful for that patient is just celebrating those strengths and working on that.
Yeah, I think the other two key components that is play to your strengths too. Like if you are trying to do something you just aren't capable of doing or uncomfortable, like acknowledge that and accept that. And the other huge part, I think, for healthcare workers or educators is self-care. How important is self-care for you as someone who's helping these individuals?
It is of the utmost importance. When we're constantly these positions of teachers, psychologists, any similar healthcare related field, you're wanting to help and you're wanting to do as much as possible, and that very quickly can lead to burnout. And I think, as we all know, healthcare workers that are feeling burnout are not providing quality care. So taking care of yourself before taking care of others is essential. I think being a parent has also taught me that you can't pour from an empty cup. So you really need to make sure you're taking care of yourself, however that may look for you, before you're trying to help anyone else. And if you're feeling that burnout or you're feeling like you might get there, you really need to take a step back and, seek supervision, and really work on whatever you need first before you're trying to help anyone else.
Mm. Yeah, and I think having your own support system with your coworkers is very important. So going the happy hour after work and talking about what happened is,
Definitely.
or meeting each other's home and talking about it is really key, because it's really, it takes a village to raise a child, autistic or not. And as we experienced it, when we work together, and I'm sure you're so experienced, there's a lot of lone wolves out there. Like that is the fastest way, I think, to burn out if you're going to lone wolf this whole thing. And it's really a team effort that playing off each other's strengths is the way you'll get through to any child, no matter how severe the autism is.
Having those coworkers to laugh with and being able to talk about that with someone that also understands has been an incredible help throughout the years, for sure.
Definitely. So what are some like self-care tips you like? What if you don't have coworkers, or you just started a job and you had your first bit of poop thrown at your face? What are some self-care tips that you've learned over the years that really help you cope with these sometimes extreme conditions to work in?
So I think giving yourself a little bit of grace and understanding that, it may be all new, and understanding that it might not be okay at first, and doing, even little things that make you feel better, whether it may be going for a run, reading a book, just taking some time for yourself has been really important. And also, if you don't have those coworkers at first that you can lean on, hopefully you do have some sort of supervisor that, at least in my experience, has always been willing to help. And that has also been a lifesaver. But I think it's also, you can talk to a friend, obviously you're not giving details of cases and stuff, but say, I had a really hard day, and just reaching out. They might not understand, but they might be willing to, listen and, give you that support of, I'm sorry you had a hard day, whether they understand it or not. That they're genuinely concerned, whether it's a partner, a friend, parent, whatever it may be. Just really reaching out as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think the other key component, I think you can attest to this, is realizing that none of these behaviors are actually about you. You've done, unless you are actually trying to abuse these children, which hopefully none of us are.
Mm-hmm.
All the violence and poop throwing and all the behaviors are a reflection of the child's inability or struggle to communicate in a way that we understand.
Absolutely.
How have you learned to not take like these behaviors personally?
I think in the beginning I did a lot of times, and that was really helped me learn. And I reached out to coworkers, supervisor, whoever, and saying, I would, explain to them a case, and then I'd be like, what did I do wrong? And they would be like, you didn't do anything wrong, ultimately, these people, especially, I usually work with children, small children. They're like, ultimately they're kids and they're still learning, and, their behaviors sometimes have nothing to do with you. And I think hearing that reinforcement from other people really helped me to be not quite so hard on myself. So that support was really essential for me, especially starting out in the field.
Gotcha. Let's see what else. What have been your experiences working with like low functioning versus high functioning autistic children, and what are some tips you've learned to work with either ends of the spectrum?
So primarily, I guess most recently, at least, my experience has been with children who are nonverbal, so a little bit lower functioning. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is, working on any sort of communication they can give you. And really, I've learned a lot about the importance of early intervention and how essential communication can be. So really trying to help them in any way that they're receptive to communicating with you, even if it is nonverbal. That has been, for me, the biggest thing I've learned working with those individuals, because I've seen how hard it is for them to be frustrated by things that they can't communicate with you. So really just trying to take anything that they'll give you in terms of communication. And then with higher functioning individuals, I guess, kind of as I said before, just learning as much as possible from them, because they're the expert on them, at the end of the day, and they have so much to teach you, and just really being receptive, no matter the age, children, adolescent. I've learned a lot from both age groups.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, it's about getting down to their level and meeting them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think the other huge key is not trying to force communication. I see a lot of people that who are just fresh and they feel like okay, this is how the book says we have to do it,
Right.
and then the goal isn't met, so they get frustrated, and
Yeah.
I think often they forget that these are human beings, that we are autistic or not, we're unpredictable.
Right.
At the end of the day, in general, we can predict some things, but like I think the key is not to force your will into a lesson or a medical situation with someone on the spectrum.
For sure.
Uh,
Really, that emphasis of just meeting them where they're at and being okay with that is really important.
Yeah, and this isn't about your ego. I think that's one of the hugest things I have also seen with, especially people that don't have psychology education or have any education. So a lot of our teachers assistants out there are college kids looking, just to get experience or have a decent job.
Right.
What would you say to those individuals that have no psychology background, that like you're working with a population that is different than anything they've seen before?
I think helping them as much as possible by kind of, helping them get to know what they're getting into. And I think a lot of times I've seen people who are just looking for any job and they don't realize what they're getting into, and they kind of forget that these are, for me at least, are children, and they need a lot of care. Again, autism or not, children are all consuming. So just helping them as much as possible to navigate that, and trying to be a support. And kind of like you said, leaving your ego at the door. It's not about you. It's about how much you can help them in terms of supporting them. It's not about you as with the savior complex. You got to leave that at the door and realize that they are going to be your own best teachers. And again, just helping those new to the field as much as possible, and helping them learn about what they're getting into.
I think the other huge part is you're their role models, where you think they're paying attention or not. Speaking as someone who is on the spectrum who does not make much eye contact, we are paying attention to everything you are saying and doing.
Absolutely.
So watch your language, because we pick up on that, and watch how you talk about us, because okay, we may be stimming in the corner, but we are freaking listening to you. And I think that's something a lot of people who don't have your background or my background are aware of. No matter how low functioning that child is, like they are aware of so much, and at the very least they can pick up on your vibes. If you're pissed off at them, they'll pick up on that, and that'll escalate them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hugest thing. My message to all the non-psychology people out there is remember their humanity. These are human beings, no matter what they're throwing at you.
Yeah.
Emotionally.
I think bringing that respect to every individual you encounter is essential to be working in this field, and remembering that whether they can communicate or not, whatever level they're at, they deserve your respect, and they understand everything you're doing. So acting with that same respectful tone at all times.
Yeah, just follow the golden rule. Treat you as you wanted to be treated with others.
Absolutely.
And then I like to end all my interviews with the following question. If you could change the way the world sees autism in one way, what would it be and why?
I guess I would say, kind of what I brought up before. I wish they could see how much they could learn from these individuals. I think um, it's gotten better recently, but in the past, people were very quick to dismiss people with autism. And I think you're missing out on so much because there are so many experiences, learning experiences to gain from this population, and really emphasizing that there's so much to learn, not only about the disorder itself, but to learn about these individuals and their experience. So I would just tell people, keep in mind you're always learning, and it's very easy to learn from individuals on the spectrum. So I think that would be my one message for the world right now, is to just listen and learn.
Mm-hmm. All right, Bridget, thank you so much for coming on my show today. All right, folks, this is another episode of Heroes of Autism. Please subscribe below. If you want to follow Bridget on Instagram, what's your Instagram?
My Instagram is Welsh, WELSH 1005 is my Instagram. You'll see a lot of my daughter.
As we should, because she's you. Good luck with motherhood. Good luck in your internship. I wish you all the luck. All right, folks, it's been real.